Hello, I'm so happy that you're here, that you found this. This is Milk Supply Risk Factors. My name is Alex Wichelka. I'm an international board certified lactation consultant, a mom of two, and I own Motherhood Blooms Lactation. This is my private practice, my business that supports breastfeeding moms through every stage of their journey to reach their breastfeeding goals, because so many times things are missed in the early days of breastfeeding. Breastfeeding is sabotaged unintentionally. So well-meaning providers just offering support that isn't necessarily in line with the goals and the hopes that you have. So I am here to help guide you through that process, because I didn't have that support that I so needed with my firstborn. It is the entire reason that I changed careers and became board certified lactation consultant, was my experience breastfeeding my firstborn and reaching out for support. So today is going to be all about milk supply risk factors, but there are so many other resources that are available for me on all different kinds of topics related to feeding your baby. So I want to first break down what low supply actually means and the different types of low supply that there are. So the very first is called primary low supply. And this is essentially, there's underlying risk factors that can affect your body's ability to produce milk. So these are the risk factors that I'm going to talk about today. There's also something that's called secondary low supply. This is what I experienced as a first-time mom. Secondary low supply, these are factors that can happen after you already start breastfeeding. So this would be things like a shallow latch, a painful latch, using the wrong flange size. All of these can lead to what's called secondary low supply. So basically, your body has full capacity, full capabilities to make enough milk for your baby, but there's these external factors affecting it. In my situation, my son had a tongue tie, so he wasn't able to remove milk well at the breast. And so my body's got the signal to say, slow down. We do not need to make milk this fast. This baby doesn't need this much milk. And it was primarily his latch combined with the fact that I wasn't doing anything like pumping to protect my milk supply. So once we remedied those things, I went on to exclusively breastfeed my baby for 17 months, but it was because it was secondary low supply. So today is all about primary low supply and potential risk factors. So this is part one of low supply risk factors. These would be things that if you've experienced them, there's the potential that your milk supply could be affected. It's not a guarantee, but the potential is there. So this is why it's important to be aware of these things, especially when you're pregnant, or if you are currently nursing or pumping and experiencing low supply, thinking about whether or not some of these are part of your health history and what you've experienced. So experiencing infertility, having polycystic ovarian syndrome, thyroid disorder, so hypo or hyperthyroid, autoimmune conditions related to thyroid like Hashimoto's, having hormonal imbalances, insulin resistance, being diabetic. These are factors that can affect your primary low milk supply. Another one that is a little bit different, but in this category, is a history of breast surgeries or trauma. Because if you had something like an augmentation or reduction, and a biopsy, depending on how long ago it's been, where the scars are, could potentially impact your milk supply, because it can directly affect the milk ducts and milk making tissue. So these are things to be aware of. These are things that as an IBCLC, I'm screening my clients for in practice, so that we can figure out what the root cause is, so that we can work towards their goals and help maximize their milk supply. Another series of low supply risk factors would be things like nutrient deficiencies. It is nutritionally demanding to be pregnant, grow a baby, move into the postpartum period, breastfeed that baby. Your body is lactating. It's nutritionally demanding. And there are key vitamins and minerals that we need more of in the postpartum period. And when some of these are deficient, things like zinc, iodine, iron, these have the potential to impact our capacity to make milk. So I mentioned iron. If you are anemic, if you've had iron deficiency, if you were iron deficient during pregnancy, related to this, if there was a postpartum hemorrhage, these are important factors to know, to be able to then address if you're experiencing what is thought as low milk supply. If you've ever had a diagnosis of hypoplastic breasts, so sometimes referred to as insufficient glandular tissue, not having or having less than average amounts of milk making tissue in the body. any pituitary disorders, really, really high levels of stress or anxiety, especially if these were pre-existing or throughout your pregnancy. These are all potential factors in how your milk supply is going to play out, basically. But the point that I want to leave you with is having one or more of these only increases your potential risk for issues with supply. Having one or more of these does not mean you will not produce enough milk for your baby, with the exception of insufficient glandular tissue, which is in some capacity ruled out after assessing all of these other things. But many of these are just increasing your potential. It's not a guarantee that you're not going to make enough milk for your baby. So as I mentioned, there's something called secondary low supply. So this is where your body has the ability to produce a full supply. So this would be an average of 24 to 32 ounces in a 24-hour period. But what's happening is there's external factors reducing this. So a poor latch, a baby who's not latched well, they're not drinking well. It might feel okay, you might be comfortable, but there's not a lot of active swallows and drinking happening at the breast. Could be things like medication. Hormonal birth control, for example, depending on when that's introduced, can have impacts on milk supply. If you have a cold, taking a decongestant with pseudoephedrine, that has the potential to reduce a milk supply. If you're pumping with the wrong flange size, and chances are you probably are, if you're using the size that came with your pump, anywhere from like 21, 24 to 28 millimeters, there's a really good chance you're probably a lot smaller than that. In my practice, the average size is about 15 to 17 millimeters when we measure the diameter of the nipple. So that means we need to resize, we need to either get a new flange or some inserts. Using the wrong pump settings, jacking up the suction, turning it up all the way to max to hope that that's going to mean you're producing more milk is not the answer. Changing the flange size, changing the fit, learning some hands-on techniques, and then learning how your pump actually functions is what you want to be doing. If you're using really old pump equipment, so if you're using a secondhand pump that, someone said they didn't really use too much, you've replaced all the pieces, do you really know how worn out that motor is? Because if that motor is not functioning effectively, it's going to reduce its suction, it's going to reduce its ability to effectively remove milk from the body, which is then going to reduce milk production. It's a supply and demand. The body has to be told how much milk it needs to be made. If there's not enough milk removals, for example, that directly affects how much milk is going to be made. If you're going a really long stretch overnight, like if you have a 4-week-old and you're going a 6-7 hour stretch overnight because you have some pumped milk, so baby's getting the bottle, like meaning your baby's not sleeping this time, they are waking up to feed, this is going to impact your milk supply because your body gets a signal that says, oh, we need to slow down. We're making milk way too fast. This baby's not even eating. So this is why it's important. This is why lactation consultants like myself will talk about feed on demand, feed on cue. When baby wakes up and says, hey, I'm hungry, I want to eat. And if you're not doing that or that's not happening, pumping in replace of that, because we have to tell the body to make more milk. Removing milk more and removing it more effectively is what's going to help increase your milk supply. So these are some sabotages that I see all of the time in my practice that would fall into that category of secondary low supply. These are things that we can fix. We can make adjustments. If your body has the full capability to make milk production, make a full supply, then we want to address everything that we can to make that happen. So if your baby has a poor latch, wrong size pump flange, tongue ties and lip ties, I mentioned that was part of my journey. If you're not nursing or pumping at night, but your baby is waking up to eat, feeling lots of stress, certain herbs, certain medications, caloric restriction, really early caloric restriction in the postpartum period is not your friend. Your body just went through a huge change and your nutrition needs actually go up. They need to increase after pregnancy, believe it or not. So that's not a period in time where we want to be restricting calories. If there's too much formula supplementation. So my firstborn needed formula supplementation. There's nothing wrong if your baby needs to be supplemented with it, but there's this nuance to it. You need to be supplemented enough so that baby gets what they need. But at the same time, we have to protect your milk supply. You have to pump. You have to still tell your body that it needs to keep making milk. Otherwise, what happens is if your baby is supplemented with too much, it's really easy to overfeed depending on your bottle technique. They'll probably sleep a little bit longer because cow's milk protein is digested very differently. and that will push the next feeding or make you feel like you're not making enough. And if you're not bringing in ways to protect your supply, like pumping, you get in this cycle, and it's called the top-up trap. I can link some more information on that below, but this ultimately will reduce milk supply. Really long uses of pacifiers. So again, you can absolutely use a pacifier and have a successful breastfeeding relationship. But if you're using a pacifiers for really long periods of time, or to push and postpone your baby's next feed because you think they're, you look at the clock and there's no way they're hungry again. Yes, they probably are. It's very normal. And so trying to space out feedings with pacifier use could impact your milk supply. If you schedule feeding, so sort of similar, saying like, you have to eat every 3 hours. If you wake up at 2 hours and 35 minutes, I have to try and stretch it to 3 hours. This is going to tell your body to slow down your milk production. And I mentioned briefly poor use of bottle feeding. So that's the technique and the way that we feed babies. Absolutely, there's many people who exclusively pump and therefore their babies are bottle fed. People who use bottles and nursing, but our bottle technique matters because babies are very, very smart. They're going to pick a method that's the easiest for them. If the flow is really, really fast, they might prefer to feed that way. But also in those situations, generally, I see some challenges with oral function. And there's a lot, if you haven't gathered already, there's a lot that I assess as a board certified lactation consultant, but there's sort of this art and science to getting the right breastfeeding support. But these are some things that I want you to think about if you're worried right now that you're not making enough milk. So how can you make more? Basically, you need to find the root cause. So we need to find out if it's a primary issue, if it's a secondary issue. We need to make a change and take action on those milk making steps, removing milk more often, removing it well. And that's what's going to, over time, tell your body to begin to produce more milk and increase your milk supply. So this could be something that you do on your own. It could be something that you do with a lactation consultant. I have many more resources for you below to help you along your journey to make more milk.